The smell of formaldehyde never bothered me until the night I found scratch marks inside drawer. #17. 3 weeks working graveyard shifts at Westlake Memorial Hospital's morgue had numbed me to most horrors. But those desperate grooves carved into cold steel, those weren't supposed to be there. The body inside was marked unclaimed, like dozens before it, but something about this one made my skin crawl. Dr. Mercer said I'd get used to the isolation, the flickering lights, the way voices sometimes carried through the vents at 3 a.m. What he never explained was why 3 attendants quit before me, or why James, my trainer, whispered, "Don't look too closely at the paperwork" on his last day. I should have listened, because once you notice the patterns in the morgue logs, once you see how many bodies vanish from the records, only to reappear with different names, you can't unsee it. And they know when you've seen too much. My first solo night shift started. Like any other, clock in at 11 p.m., check the overnight manifest, ensure all refrigeration units maintained proper temperature. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly green pallor that made even my fair skin look corpse-like in the bathroom mirror. Just the paperwork, temperature logs, and basic intake if anyone arrives, James had explained. During training, Dr. Mercer handles all medical examinations and processing. Processing. Such a clinical term for what happens to human remains. I settled at the small metal desk, scanning the night's log. 3 bodies already in storage. 2 expected from IE before morning. 1 marked for transfer to the funeral home at 6 a.m., right before my shift ended. Standard procedure, but as I reviewed the paperwork, something caught my eye. A female, age 38, car accident victim. Jessica Miller. Her intake form was marked unclaimed with a red stamp across it, yet her personal effects inventory listed a wedding ring, smartphone, and wallet containing family photos. Unclaimed bodies weren't unusual. Homeless individuals, estranged family situations, or simply people who died without next of kin. But someone with a wedding ring and family photos? That didn't track. I pulled the drawer containing Jessica Miller. The chill that escaped made me shiver as I checked her tag against the paperwork. Everything matched, but the inconsistency nagged at me. I examined her personal effects bag. Inside, a simple gold band engraved with "Forever Yours, M." A smartphone with multiple missed calls from Mom and Mike. A wallet with credit cards and a family photo showing Jessica standing beside a man and 2 young children. This woman had people who cared about her, people who would be looking for her. Why was she marked unclaimed? I returned to the computer terminal, searching recent death records. Jessica Miller's status showed next of kin notified, no response. But according to the timestamps, the unclaimed designation had been applied barely 4 hours after her death. Hospital policy required at least 72 hours of attempted contact before such classification. A door slammed somewhere down the corridor, making me jump. The morgue was supposedly secure, accessible only with proper credentials. I rose from the desk, heart pounding. "Hello?" My voice sounded small in the cavernous room. "Doc." No response. I checked the security panel by the door. All systems normal, no unauthorized entries. When I returned to the desk, I noticed a new file had appeared. Transfer orders for Jessica Miller. Scheduled for 3 a.m., not 6 a.m. as originally noted. Signature, Dr. Mercer. I hadn't heard anyone enter. Hadn't seen anyone on the security cameras. Yet somehow, the paperwork had changed. The wedding ring felt cold in my palm as I retrieved it from the personal effects bag. Something was very wrong here. I slipped the ring into my pocket, telling myself I'd document it properly later. That I'd make sure it got to her family. I didn't know then that I'd just taken my first step down a path I could never return from. That this simple gold band would become the first piece of evidence in a case that would nearly cost me my life. The morgue seemed colder suddenly, the shadows deeper. And for the first time since taking this job, I felt like I wasn't alone among the dead. I hadn't meant to stay late. My shift had technically ended at 7 a.m., but the replacement attendant called in sick. Dr. Mercer asked if I could stay until noon when he'd have someone else cover. The overtime pay was good, and I needed the money for rent. "Just handle the paperwork, Daniel," he said, his thin lips barely moving when he spoke. "I'll take care of everything else." I nodded, trying not to stare at his unnaturally pale complexion, or the way his eyes never seemed to blink enough. Something about Dr. Mercer had always unsettled me, but I couldn't afford to be picky about coworkers. Around 11:30 a.m., I heard voices in the main examination room. Dr. Mercer wasn't scheduled for any autopsies. Curious, I walked down the hallway, clipboard in hand as an excuse if anyone questioned my presence. The double doors to the exam room were closed, but not sealed. Through the narrow window, I saw Dr. Mercer in full surgical gear, joined by two assistants I'd never seen before. Neither wore hospital IDs. On the table lay Jessica Miller, the unclaimed woman from earlier, the woman whose body should have been transferred hours ago, according to the updated paperwork. I ducked back as one of the assistants glanced toward the door. Heart racing, I slipped behind a supply cabinet, close enough to hear their conversation through the air vent. "Subject matches all parameters," a female voice said clinically. "Tissue typing confirms compatibility with the Hong Kong client." "Excellent," Dr. Mercer replied. "Liver, kidneys, and corneas are priority. Cardiac tissue for research. The rest for educational specimens." "Time of death was optimal," the woman continued. "Minimal damage to vital organs from the accident. Family situation? Handled," Dr. Mercer said. "Husband received notification of cremation. Ashes shipped yesterday." My blood turned cold. Jessica Miller had died less than 24 hours ago. Her body was clearly not cremated. And her husband? He would never know what really happened to her. The sound of a bone saw startled me. I should leave, report this, call the police. But who would believe me against the word of the hospital's chief medical examiner? I needed evidence. My hands shook. As I pulled out my phone, angling it to capture images through the vent slats, Dr. Mercer worked methodically, removing organs and placing them in specialized containers the assistants prepared. Each container was labeled not with hospital codes, but with names and flight numbers. "Next shipment leaves at 2 p.m., the male assistant said. "We need to expedite processing." "The documentation is already complete," Dr. Mercer replied. "Subject officially unclaimed, donated to medical science. All legal requirements satisfied. And the personal effects? Disposal protocol. Nothing traceable remains. Except the wedding ring in my pocket. The ring I'd impulsively kept. The floor creaked beneath my weight as I shifted position. The conversation inside stopped. "Did you hear that?" the female assistant asked. I froze, not daring to breathe. After an eternity, Dr. Mercer responded, "Probably maintenance. Nevertheless, seal the room. No interruptions until we finish." I heard the electronic lock engage. Moving silently, I retreated to the staff break room, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled so badly, I could barely unlock my phone to check the photos. They were blurry but identifiable. Dr. Mercer and his assistants. The specialized containers. Jessica Miller's face partially visible, eyes staring lifelessly at the camera as if begging me to tell her story. I knew then I couldn't go to hospital administration. This operation was too organized, too professional. I needed outside help, and I needed to be very, very careful. Sleep evaded me for 2 days after witnessing Dr. Mercer's clandestine operation. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica Miller's vacant stare, heard the bone saw whirring, imagined her organs packed in sterile containers bound for destinations unknown. I called in sick on the 3rd day, using a manufactured stomach bug as my excuse. Dr. Mercer sounded skeptical, but didn't press the issue. "Take care of yourself, Daniel," he said with artificial concern. "We need you back at full strength." The implied threat wasn't lost on me. Instead of recuperating at home, I drove to Hillside Cemetery, the county burial ground where unclaimed bodies were interred. The sprawling property sat on the outskirts of town, rolling green hills dotted with modest headstones and simple markers. I parked near the administrative building, a small stone structure with ivy climbing its walls. The autumn air carried the scent of freshly turned soil and cut grass. Under different circumstances, it might have been peaceful. The section designated for unclaimed remains was tucked behind a row of cypress trees, partially hidden from the main grounds. I expected neglect, forgotten souls left to eternity without mourners. What I found instead stopped me cold. Fresh flowers adorned several of the newest graves. Not expensive arrangements, but thoughtful bouquets of carnations and daisies. Some plots had small trinkets: a toy car, a paperback novel, a baseball cap. These weren't the graves of forgotten people. These were loved ones being mourned. "Can I help you?" I startled at the female voice behind me. Turning, I found myself face to face with a young woman in the cemetery's maintenance uniform. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her fair skin slightly flushed from working outdoors. "I'm just visiting," I said lamely, gesturing toward the graves. Her blue eyes narrowed slightly. "Most people don't visit the unclaimed section unless they're looking for someone specific." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I work at Westlake Memorial." In the morgue, something flickered across her face. Recognition? Fear? She glanced around quickly before stepping closer. "My name is Sarah," she said quietly. "Sarah Wells. I'm the groundskeeper for this section." "Daniel Foster," I replied, extending my hand. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused from physical labor. "The flowers," I said, nodding toward the graves. "I thought unclaimed meant no family." Sarah's expression darkened. "That's what the paperwork says. Reality tells a different story." She knelt beside a recent grave, touching the petals of a bright yellow daisy. "This is Margaret Chun. According to official records, she died alone, no next of kin. Yet her daughter visits weekly, confused why the hospital told her mother's body was already cremated when she came to claim it." My stomach lurched. The same story as Jessica Miller. "How many?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Too many," Sarah replied. "Especially in the last 6 months. All from Westlake. All with similar stories from family members who eventually track them here." "How did you get involved?" Sarah stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "My brother died last year. Motorcycle accident. When I went to claim his body, they told me he'd been cremated already. Administrative error, they said." Her voice hardened. I knew it was a lie. Ryan had a donor card, but he specifically didn't want cremation. We had discussed it extensively. I felt lightheaded as the implications sank in. This wasn't isolated. This was systematic. "I took this job to investigate," Sarah continued. "Started keeping records, talking to families who visit looking for closure." "Have you gone to the police? With what evidence?" "Grieving families confused about paperwork? The hospital has all the official documentation." A groundskeeper's cart trundled around the corner, driven by an older man who waved at Sarah. "I should get back to work," she said. "But if you're asking questions about Westlake's unclaimed bodies, you should be careful." She pulled a card from her pocket, my number. "Call me if you find anything concrete." As she walked away, I realized I had finally found an ally. But her warning echoed in my mind. Be careful. If only I had understood then just how dangerous this would become. I returned to work with a new purpose, fear curdling into determination. If Dr. Mercer and his associates were harvesting organs from people marked unclaimed, I needed proof that would stand up to scrutiny. Something undeniable. For 2 weeks, I meticulously documented every body that came through the morgue. I created a separate log on my personal phone, recording names, times, personal effects, and most importantly, which ones received the red, unclaimed stamp, despite evidence of family connections. The pattern became clear quickly. Ideal candidates were accident victims between 25 and 45. No chronic illnesses noted in their files, with visible evidence of family, but family members who lived out of state or would need time to travel. By the time relatives arrived, the bodies had disappeared into the system, paperwork showing cremation or transfer to research facilities. Administrative errors, the families were told. Nothing to be done now. I needed access to historical records to establish the timeline. How long had this been happening? How many victims? The hospital maintained physical backups in the records department basement, supposedly secure but accessible to medical staff with proper clearance. My midnight shift gave me the perfect opportunity. Most of the administrative staff had gone home, security reduced to minimum coverage. I waited until 2 a.m. before making my move, clipboard in hand to suggest official business if stopped. The records room required a keycard. Mine wouldn't grant access, but I'd noticed Dr. Mercer never seemed to use his card. The door always opened for him automatically. A level of clearance beyond normal staff. I tried the old-fashioned approach instead. A maintenance request form, taped to the door, waiting patiently until the night janitor made his rounds. Records room needs attention, I explained when he appeared. Dr. Mercer sent me to retrieve some files while you clean. The janitor, an older man with rheumy eyes, barely glanced at my hospital ID before unlocking the door. "Don't make a mess," he muttered. "I just did this room yesterday." Inside, filing cabinets stretched from floor to ceiling, organized by year and department. I headed straight for the morgue section, pulling records from 6 months ago, when Sarah said the pattern of unclaimed bodies had increased. I worked quickly, photographing log sheets and transfer orders, focusing on discrepancies. Bodies marked unclaimed within hours rather than days. Transfer orders with vague destinations. Signatures from Dr. Mercer authorizing unusual procedures. The evidence was compelling, but still circumstantial. I needed something definitive, something that would convince authorities to investigate, despite Dr. Mercer's sterling reputation. Then I found it. A separate logbook, misfiled among older records, detailing specimen transfers to a company called Novigen Therapeutics. The entries corresponded perfectly with several unclaimed cases I'd already documented. Each entry included detailed organ inventories and tissue typing information. I photographed every page, hands trembling with a mixture of vindication and horror. This was it. Proof of systematic organ harvesting disguised as proper medical procedure. As I replaced the logbook, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency lighting activated seconds later, bathing everything in dim red illumination. The security camera in the corner, previously dormant, whirred to life, its lens adjusting to focus directly on me. Heart pounding, I calmly gathered my clipboard and walked toward the exit, fighting the urge to run. The door swung open before I reached it. Dr. Mercer stood in the hallway, his tall frame silhouetted against the brighter corridor lights. His thin lips formed something approximating a smile, though no warmth reached his eyes. "Daniel," he said, softly. "Working late, I see." "Just pulling some comparison data," I replied, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Mortality statistics for my night school research paper." He studied me for a long moment, his gaze unnervingly intense. "Admirable dedication. Though I'm sure you know these records require special authorization." "The janitor let me in," I explained. "I assumed it was okay, since it's for educational purposes." "Of course," Dr. Mercer nodded slightly. Education is important. But next time, come to me directly. I'd be happy to provide guidance on your research. The threat lingered unspoken between us. Will do, I managed to say, sorry for the confusion. No harm done, he replied, stepping aside to let me pass. We all make mistakes when we're learning. I felt his eyes on my back as I walked away, my phone burning in my pocket with its damning evidence. He knew. Somehow, he knew I'd seen too. The next night, the Norwegian logbook had vanished as if it never existed. The security cameras bothered me. After my encounter with Dr. Mercer in the records room, I noticed their subtle movements tracking my path through the hospital corridors. The previously static camera outside the morgue now swiveled slightly. Whenever I approached, its red recording light blinking with renewed purpose, I began varying my routines, taking different routes to the break room, changing when I filed paperwork. Small rebellions against the watchful eyes that followed me. 3 nights after the records room incident, I was heading to the cafeteria when someone grabbed my arm, pulling me into a dimly lit stairwell. I nearly shouted until I recognized the security guard's uniform. "Keep your voice down," the man whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "Cameras have blind spots here." He was older, maybe mid-50s, with steel blue eyes that had seen too much and silver-streaked hair cropped, military short. His name badge read Christopher. "What do you want?" I asked, heart still racing from the ambush. "To warn you." Christopher's voice was gravel rough from years of cigarettes. "You've been asking questions, looking at records, taking photos." My blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it." He cut me off. "I've been watching the security feeds. The system flags anyone accessing certain areas. Records room. Morgue after hours. Sub-basement. Sub-basement? The hospital. Blueprints I'd seen only showed one basement level." Christopher's expression darkened. "Official blueprints don't show everything. But that's not important right now. What matters is you're on their radar." "Whose radar?" "Mercer. His team. The ones who come at night." I studied his face, looking for signs of deception or instability. Instead, I saw only fear and grim certainty. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Christopher pushed up his sleeve, revealing a jagged surgical scar running from wrist to elbow, too precise to be accidental. "Because 3 years ago," I asked, "the same questions you're asking now. Saw things I wasn't supposed to see. What happened? Woke up in the recovery ward. Told I'd been in an accident. Internal bleeding required emergency surgery." His laugh was hollow. "Funny thing about that surgery. My kidney function's never been the same. I felt sick. They took." "Your kidney? Can't prove it?" "Records show routine emergency surgery, but I know." His eyes held mine. "Just like those night guards who quit last month know." "What did they see?" Christopher leaned closer. "Deliveries, not to the morgue. To the sub-basement. People wheeled in under sheets, officially pronounced dead upstairs. But Taylor swears one of them was moving, making sounds." A chill ran through me. "Why haven't you reported this?" "To who?" "Hospital administration? Police?" He shook his head. "Without proof, it's the word of a security guard against decorated doctors. And the few times someone has made noise." He gestured to his arm. "Accidents happen." The stairwell door opened on the floor above us. Christopher immediately straightened, adopting an authoritative posture. "Keep your ID visible at all times, please," he said loudly, for the benefit of whoever might be listening. Then, barely audible, "Watch the vents. 3:17 a.m. every night." He turned and climbed the stairs, passing a nurse who barely glanced our way. I continued to the cafeteria, mind racing. The sub-basement. Deliveries of bodies that weren't quite dead. 3:17 a.m. And now I had confirmation. I wasn't imagining the surveillance. They were watching me. The question was, What would they do when they decided I'd seen too much? That night, I positioned myself near the main air duct in the morgue at 3:15 a.m., pretending to inventory supplies. At precisely 3:17, I heard it, a low, mechanical hum, then sounds that made my skin crawl. Metal against metal, something heavy being dragged. And underneath it all, nearly imperceptible, but unmistakable, a human moan. The sounds from the vent haunted me for days. I became obsessed with the sub-basement Christopher had mentioned, searching hospital blueprints, questioning maintenance staff about access points. My inquiries earned me strange looks, but little information. Whatever existed below the main basement wasn't common knowledge. Meanwhile, I continued my documentation of the unclaimed bodies, noting with growing unease how many fit the same profile. Young to middle-aged, good health, accident victims with minimal damage to vital organs. Perfect donor candidates. I shared my findings with Sarah during our clandestine meetings at a coffee shop far from the hospital. She contributed burial records, showing the accelerating pattern, names and dates matching my morgue logs with frightening precision. "We need more," she said, her auburn hair falling across her face as she leaned forward. Something irrefutable. She was right. We had circumstantial evidence, patterns that suggested wrongdoing, but nothing that would stand up against the hospital's official records. And Dr. Mercer's reputation. That changed on a Tuesday night in October. I was processing a new arrival, a John Doe found in the river, when the power flickered. The backup generator kicked in almost immediately, but the brief darkness disoriented me. As lights returned, I noticed drawer number 17 was slightly ajar. Drawer number 17 should have been empty according to the logs. I approached cautiously, wondering if I'd left it open earlier. The metal handle felt unusually cold as I pulled it fully open. Empty, but something caught my eye on the interior wall of the drawer. Marks in the metal that didn't match the manufactured finish. I grabbed my phone's flashlight for a better look, and my blood froze. Scratches, dozens of them, some deep enough to have torn fingernails, and they formed a pattern. Not random desperation, but deliberate marks. Words. Alive Help May stared in horror, the implications too terrible to process. Someone had been conscious inside this drawer. Someone had desperately tried to signal for help, their only tool their own fingernails against unyielding metal. With shaking hands, I photographed the scratches from multiple angles, making sure the drawer number was clearly visible. Then I methodically checked every other drawer in the cold storage unit. 3 more contained similar scratches, though none with coherent words. Just frantic, desperate attempts to escape. I sent the photos to Sarah immediately, then to my personal email as backup. Evidence this damning wouldn't stay hidden for long once discovered. I was right about that, though not in the way I expected. The next night, drawer number 17 was immaculate. The scratches had been polished away, the metal interior gleaming under the cindy fluorescent lights as if newly manufactured. The other marked drawers had received the same treatment. My evidence had vanished overnight, but the memory remained, the horror of what those scratches represented. People, conscious and aware, locked inside cold storage. The moans from the vents at 3:17 a.m., the unclaimed bodies with fresh surgical incisions. I was forming a theory too terrible to contemplate. Not just organ harvesting from the recently deceased, but something far worse. What if the donors weren't always dead when the harvesting began? My phone chimed with a message from Sarah. Cemetery records show empty casket for drawer number 17 occupant. Family told cremation. We need to talk. I pocketed my phone, suddenly aware of the silence in the morgue. The usual hum of refrigeration units had stopped. The ambient sounds of the hospital above had faded away. I was alone in a perfect, unnatural quiet. Then I noticed it. My locker door, previously closed, now stood slightly open. Heart pounding, I approached and pulled it open fully. Inside, scratched into the metal interior of my own locker door. 4 words. You saw nothing. Forget. The threat was unmistakable. They knew what I'd discovered. They knew I had evidence. And they had access to everything. Could reach me anywhere in the hospital. As if to emphasize this point, the security camera in the corner slowly rotated toward me, its red light blinking steadily like a malevolent eye. I maintained my routine for the rest of the shift, fighting to keep my expression neutral, my movements casual. But inside, terror and rage battled for dominance. People were suffering unimaginable horrors in this hospital, and the same fate might await me if I didn't find a way to expose the truth. When morning came, I left the hospital with one certainty. I could trust no one except Sarah, and we needed to move quickly before we both became unclaimed. The surveillance escalated after I discovered the scratches. Security cameras that had subtly tracked my movements now blatantly swiveled to follow me through corridors. The night guard who replaced Christopher on his days off watched me with blank, unwavering attention, his hand always near his radio. My apartment no longer felt safe. I returned home after a shift to find subtle changes. A chair slightly repositioned, books on my shelf rearranged. Nothing valuable missing, but the violation was clear. Someone had been there, looking through my things, sending a message. I began, leaving small tells, a thread across my doorframe, a pencil balanced on my laptop. Each day, I'd return to find them disturbed or removed entirely. They weren't even trying to hide their intrusions anymore. Sleep became impossible. I dozed in short bursts, jerking awake at the slightest sound, convinced someone stood watching in the darkness. The rational part of my brain insisted this was paranoia. The evidence suggested otherwise. I called Sarah from a payphone, unwilling to risk my cell being monitored. "We need to meet," I said when she answered. "Not the usual place." "The Rose. Garden at Hillside," she suggested. "I'm working there today. No cameras, plenty of visitors. You'll blend in." The cemetery grounds were peaceful in the afternoon sunlight, belying the horrors connected to this place. Sarah was trimming roses when I arrived, her auburn hair tied back, work gloves protecting her hands. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. As I approached, "Haven't been sleeping well," I admitted. "My apartment's been searched multiple times." Sarah's expression darkened. "They're watching me too. Black sedan parked across from my place for 3 nights straight. Same driver, never leaves the car. Have you seen his face? Always wears a hat, keeps his head down. But I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror yesterday." She shuddered slightly. There was something wrong with his eyes. Too wide, never blinking. I told her about the scratches in the morgue drawers, the message in my locker, the sounds at 3:17 a.m. "Jesus," she whispered. "You think they're taking people who aren't dead? Actually harvesting from living donors? Or keeping them alive somehow during the process?" I said. "Christopher mentioned people being moved who are still making sounds, and those scratches ... "We need to find the sub-basement," Sarah decided. "See what's happening there." "It's too dangerous," I protested. "They're watching both of us. If we start poking around restricted areas." "What choice do we have?" Sarah's blue eyes flashed with determination. "People are suffering. Families are being lied to. And now we're targets too. Our only protection is exposing everything." She was right. Half measures wouldn't save us now. We needed irrefutable evidence, something so damning that not even Dr. Mercer's reputation could withstand it. "Christopher might help," I suggested. "He has access to security systems, knows the hospital layout. Can you trust him?" He warned me, showed me his scar. "I think he wants this stopped, but was too afraid to act alone." Sarah nodded, then froze, her gaze fixed over my shoulder. "Don't turn around suddenly," she murmured. Black sedan, north entrance. The driver's watching us. Fighting every instinct, I casually shifted position, angling for a view of the cemetery entrance. The car sat idling just inside the gate, its tinted windows concealing all but a silhouette of the driver. "Has he followed you before?" I asked quietly. "Not to work," Sarah replied, pretending to trim roses. "This is new. They must know we're working together now." As we watched, the driver's window lowered slightly. Not enough to see a face, but enough for the glint of something metallic to catch the sunlight. "Is that a camera?" Sarah whispered "Dot" before. I could answer. My phone vibrated with a text message. "Unknown number. Conversations in gardens carry far. Remember your place. Daniel. Some questions have deadly answers." I showed Sarah the screen, watching the color drain from her face. "They can hear us," she said, voice barely audible. From that distance. The sedan's engine revved once, then the car slowly pulled away, its message delivered. My apartment tonight, I decided, already compromised, so no additional risk. Bathroom, with shower running. They can't have bugs everywhere. Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly, then loudly said, "Thanks for visiting, but I need to finish these beds before my shift ends." As I walked away, the weight of invisible eyes pressed upon me. We were mice in a maze, our every movement tracked, our options narrowing by the hour, and somewhere beneath Westlake Memorial, the true horrors continued unchecked. Christopher agreed to help us access the sub-basement, his fear finally outweighed by conscience. "Tuesday night," he told me during a carefully staged encounter in the hospital cafeteria. "Loading dock entrance. 3 a.m. Security cameras loop 4. System maintenance then." Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Each shift felt like walking through a minefield, Dr. Mercer's gaze following me with predatory intensity. The message in my locker had been replaced with a new one. "Time running out. Choose wisely." I wasn't the only target. Sarah reported increased. Surveillance. Her phone clearly tapped. Her apartment invaded while she worked. "They took nothing," she said, her voice trembling despite her brave front. "But they left my dresser drawers open, my personal items handled, letting me know they can reach me any time." The psychological warfare was deliberate, designed to break us down, make us sloppy, drive us to abandon our investigation. Instead, it hardened our resolve. Before meeting Christopher, I decided to conduct one final solo reconnaissance. My shift ended at midnight on Monday, but I told a colleague I'd forgotten my phone charger and needed to retrieve it. Once back inside, I found an unused supply closet near the morgue, positioned to observe the loading dock without being seen. At 2:47 a.m., the first vehicle arrived. Not an ambulance as expected, but an unmarked white van with tinted windows. 2 men in scrubs emerged, opened the rear doors, and unloaded a gurney. The body under the sheet lay perfectly still, but the orderlies handled it with unusual care. Avoiding sudden movements, Dr. Mercer appeared moments later, clipboard in hand. He inspected whatever lay beneath the sheet, making notes before gesturing toward the service elevator. Not the main hospital elevators, but a smaller one I'd assumed was for maintenance. 2 more vans arrived within the next hour. Same procedure, same destination. On the 3rd delivery, something went wrong. As the orderlies transferred the gurney, from the van, one corner of the sheet slipped, revealing not a body, but a specialized medical container. Inside, visible for just moments before being recovered, I glimpsed what looked like organs suspended in clear fluid, but what seared itself into my memory wasn't the organs themselves. It was the unmistakable movement, rhythmic, purposeful. Heart still beating outside a body. I nearly gasped aloud, giving away my position. This wasn't just organ harvesting from the newly deceased. They were keeping organs viable for extended periods, likely for transport to distant recipients. The 4th van brought something different. Men in business attire emerged, escorted directly to the service elevator by Dr. Mercer himself. Wealthy clients, perhaps, coming to view merchandise before purchase? The thought made me physically ill. I waited until the loading dock cleared before slipping out of my hiding place. The service elevator required a key card, but the maintenance stairwell beside it had only a simple lock. Using techniques from my misspent youth, I managed to open it with a borrowed hospital ID card. The stairs descended past the main basement level, confirming Christopher's claim about the sub-basement. At the bottom, a heavy door marked Mechanical Systems stood closed but not alarmed. I pressed my ear against it, hearing the hum of equipment and, more disturbingly, what sounded like muffled voices. I couldn't risk opening it alone. Tuesday's plan with Christopher would have to proceed. But I needed to know where these organs were going. The vans had arrived empty, departed empty. The harvested materials must have another exit route. Returning to the loading dock, I noticed tire tracks leading around the building toward a rarely used side entrance. Following at a distance, I watched the final van of the night exit through this secondary route. This time I was prepared. I'd borrowed a colleague's bicycle left in the hospital rack, allowing me to follow discreetly as the van wound through empty streets. My fair skin felt ghostly in the moonlight, but the darkness otherwise concealed me as I maintained distance while tracking my quarry. After 20 minutes, the van turned into a gated complex with minimal signage. One discreet plaque near the entrance read, Novigen Therapeutics, confirming the connection to the logbook I'd discovered. The facility looked like any other medical research building, its modern glass exterior revealing nothing of its true purpose. As I watched from behind a landscaping berm, another vehicle arrived. Not a van, but a luxury sedan with diplomatic plates. A well-dressed woman emerged, escorted quickly inside by staff in lab coats. Not a donor. A recipient. I'd found the destination, the final link in the chain. Organs harvested from unclaimed bodies at Westlake Memorial ended up here, transplanted into wealthy clients who bypassed traditional waiting lists through this black market operation. Photographing the building and the van's license plate, I retreated, knowing Tuesday's expedition with Christopher would provide the final pieces of evidence we needed. With proof of both the harvesting operation and its commercial endpoint, not even Dr. Mercer could escape justice. I didn't notice the security camera mounted on the perimeter fence, its lens silently tracking my departure, capturing my face in perfect digital clarity. The Miller family lived in a modest suburban home 30 miles from Westlake Memorial. Finding them had been surprisingly easy. Jessica Miller's phone, which I'd impulsively kept from her personal effects, contained dozens of messages from Mike, begging for information about her condition after the accident. Sarah thought approaching the family was too risky. They'll report back to the hospital, she argued. Administration will know we're investigating. They've lost their wife and mother, I countered. They deserve to know the truth. The truth might get us killed before we can help anyone. She was right, but I couldn't shake the image of Jessica Miller's body on that table, her organs packaged and shipped to unknown recipients while her family received an urn of anonymous ashes. I called Mike Miller, claiming to be from the hospital's patient advocacy department, reviewing accident cases for quality improvement. He agreed to meet, his voice heavy with grief, but eager for any connection to his wife's final moments. The Miller home breathed family from every corner. Photos lined the walls, tracking a shared life. Jessica's blonde hair and blue eyes mirrored in her 2 young daughters, who played quietly in the next room. Mike, hollow-eyed from sleepless grief, clutched a coffee mug emblazoned with "World's Best Dad" as he recounted the nightmare. The hospital called about the accident. Sighed Jessica was in surgery. His voice cracked. By the time I got the girls from school and drove there, they told me she was gone. That she'd lost too much blood. I'm so sorry, I said, the words inadequate. Against such loss, But that wasn't the worst part. Anger flashed through his grief. When I asked to see her, to say goodbye, they said she'd already been taken to the morgue. Then when I returned the next morning, they claimed there had been a mix-up. That following her organ donor wishes, she'd already been cremated, without your consent. I kept my voice neutral, professional, though rage burned inside me. They showed me forms, my signature authorizing everything. He pushed a folder across the table. But I never signed these, never even saw them until after they said she was cremated. The forgery was professional, but unmistakable. The signature didn't match Mike's on other documents I'd asked to see. Moreover, the cremation authorization was dated just 6 hours after Jessica's time of death. Impossible to process legitimately that quickly. Did you receive her personal effects? I asked, thinking of the wedding ring I still carried. Just her clothes, damaged from the accident. They said her jewelry and phone must have been lost in the emergency room. His hand unconsciously twisted his own wedding band. Her ring is just gone. I made my decision then. Ethics and caution be damned. I reached into my pocket and placed Jessica's wedding ring on the table. Mike stared at it, uncomprehending, then with trembling fingers picked it up. Where did you get this? From the morgue. Jessica's body was never cremated, Mr. Miller. She was marked unclaimed, despite clear identification and contact information. I took a deep breath. I believe her organs were harvested and sold through a black market operation run from within the hospital. His face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock, disbelief, horror, rage. Who are you really? He whispered. Someone trying to stop this from happening to other families. I slid my business card across the table. I need to know if you're willing to help. Mike clutched the ring so tightly his knuckles whitened. In the next room, his daughters laughed at something on television, oblivious to how their world had shattered anew. They stole parts of my wife, he said, voice deadly calm. Treated her like spare parts and gave us ashes that probably aren't even hers. His eyes met mine, grief hardening into resolve. What do you need me to do? File an official complaint, demanding investigation into Jessica's case. Request her complete medical records. Demand to know the origin of the ashes you received. I leaned forward. Create official scrutiny they can't quietly make disappear. Will it be dangerous? I couldn't lie to him. Yes, for all of us. Mike looked toward his daughters, then back at the ring in his palm. Jessica would want me to fight, to protect others from this. As I left the Miller home, I felt watched again. Not the obvious surveillance of recent days, but something more insidious. The weight of invisible eyes tracking my movements, noting my connections, calculating my vulnerability. I just made myself more dangerous to Dr. Mercer and his operation. But I'd also gained an ally with nothing left to lose. Tuesday night arrived with an almost palpable tension. I'd worked my regular shift, maintaining a facade of normalcy, despite Dr. Mercer's increasingly pointed comments about loyalty to the institution and career-ending mistakes. The threat lurked beneath his professional veneer, all the more menacing for its restraint. Sarah met me in the hospital parking garage at 2:30 a.m., her face pale with determination. Christopher had texted confirmation that security cameras would loop from 3 o'clock to 3:20, giving us a narrow window to access the sub-basement undetected. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked as we waited in her car, watching the employee entrance. We could still take what we have to the police. Circumstantial evidence and speculation, I replied. We need something concrete. Photos, documents, first-hand observation of the facility. Christopher appeared at precisely 2:55, his security uniform lending legitimacy to our presence. Without speaking, he led us through service corridors rarely used by regular staff, avoiding the main halls where even looped camera footage might be noticed by an observant guard. Security override begins in 3 minutes, he whispered, stopping before the maintenance stairwell I'd found earlier. We'll have 20 minutes before systems. Reset. Whatever you're looking for, find it fast. He swiped his access card, then entered an override code on the keypad. The door unlocked with an audible click. I'll stay here as lookout, Christopher said. 1 pulse on this walkie means trouble coming. 2 pulses means immediate evacuation. 3 means you're already compromised and should hide. Sarah and I nodded, accepting the spare radio he offered. Good luck, he added grimly. Don't touch anything unless you're wearing these. He handed us each a pair of surgical gloves. And remember, anything you find down there will make you a target. They won't stop hunting you once you've seen it. The stairwell descended deeper than I expected, the concrete steps worn from years of use. The air grew progressively cooler, carrying a distinct antiseptic scent underneath the must INESS dot at the bottom. Another key-carded door awaited, this one labeled Biomedical Research Authorized Personnel Only. Christopher's MasterCard worked, here too, granting us access to a dimly lit corridor that stretched in both directions. Check every room, Sarah whispered, her auburn hair tucked beneath a surgical cap borrowed from hospital supplies. Take photos of everything. The first door revealed nothing unusual, just maintenance equipment and cleaning supplies. The second contained outdated medical equipment in various states of disrepair. The third door changed everything, got it opened into a fully equipped surgical suite, far more advanced than those on the main surgical floor. Specialized equipment lined the walls, including organ preservation systems I recognized from transplant documentaries. A surgical table dominated the center, complete with restraints for arms and legs. Why would a cadaver need restraints? Sarah's voice shook slightly. The adjacent room held the answer. 6 specialized medical capsules, each containing a single organ suspended in preservation fluid, kidneys, livers, lungs. And beside each, detailed documentation of tissue typing, procurement dates, and staggeringly high price points in multiple currencies. My God, Sarah breathed, photographing everything. They're selling them worldwide. But the true horror awaited in the final room. 3 bodies lay on gurneys, technically dead, according to the charts hanging nearby, but connected to minimal life support equipment, maintaining cellular viability. Their chests barely moved with shallow breaths, eyes closed but occasionally fluttering. These weren't corpses. These were living donors, maintained in a vegetative state while their organs were harvested one by one. They're keeping them alive, I choked out, harvesting multiple organs from each donor over time. Sarah's camera clicked rapidly, documenting the atrocity. The charts show staged harvesting schedules. Kidneys first, then partial liver, eventually lungs and heart as final procedures when the donors are no longer viable. I examined the donor charts, recognizing the pattern from morgue records, all unclaimed bodies. All listed as cremated in official hospital documentation. All still breathing on these gurneys, their bodies being systematically stripped for parts. Look at this, Sarah called from a filing cabinet. Complete records of their operation. Donor acquisition protocols, client lists, financial transactions. She began photographing each page methodically. Shipping manifests to medical tourism facilities worldwide. A sheet of paper caught my eye. Not a medical chart, but a list of names under the heading Potential. Donors under evaluation. Staff members. Hospital employees flagged for observation. My name was there, halfway down the list. So was Sarah's, each with blood types and tissue profiles already documented for mandatory employee health screenings. We weren't just investigators. We were potential inventory. The walkie-talkie beeped once. Christopher's warning. Someone was coming. We need to go, I urged, helping Sarah gather the last documents. Wait, she said, pointing to a computer. Their database must be on this network. The walkie beeped again. 2 pulses. Immediate evacuation. No time, I insisted, pulling her toward the door. We have enough. The corridor outside remained empty as we raced toward the stairwell. Christopher met us halfway, face taut with fear. Mercer just arrived with 2 security guards I don't recognize, he hissed. They're heading down the main elevator. Is there another way out? Sarah asked. Christopher nodded. Service elevator. Opposite direction. I'll create a distraction. Before we could protest, he was moving toward the sounds of approaching footsteps, radio in hand, prepared to sacrifice his safety for ours. Sarah and I reached the service elevator, unseen, riding it to the loading dock level. As we slipped into the night, the evidence of unimaginable horrors secured in Sarah's camera and my phone. One thought consumed me. They already knew who we were, and they would never let us expose their operation. We didn't go home after escaping the sub-basement. Too dangerous. Instead, we drove to a 24-hour diner 30 miles away, choosing a booth in the back corner where we could watch the entrance. While examining our evidence, Sarah's hands trembled as she connected her camera to her laptop. I still can't believe what we saw, she whispered. Those people were alive, Daniel. Technically alive while being harvested. The horror hadn't fully registered yet. My mind kept returning to the list with our names. The clinical evaluation of our organs' market value. The knowledge that we could have ended up on those gurneys, conscious but helpless, as our bodies were systematically disassembled. We need to understand the full operation before going to authorities, I said, focusing on practicalities to keep panic at bay. How extensive is it? Who's involved? The photos revealed more than we'd initially grasped. Patient charts showed detailed organ harvesting schedules, with donors maintained on life support for weeks or even months as multiple organs were removed sequentially. Blood work and medication regimens demonstrated sophisticated medical protocols to maximize organ viability. More disturbing were the financial documents, spreadsheets tracking millions in revenue, organized by organ type and destination. Kidneys commanded $150,000 each. Hearts went for over $500,000. Specialty items like corneas for wealthy clients in Asia fetched premium prices. This isn't some small-scale black market operation, Sarah said, scrolling through client lists. This is organized, international organ trafficking. Look at these recipients: Saudi princes, Chinese billionaires, Russian oligarchs. I examined the Novigen Therapeutics documentation. What appeared to be a legitimate medical research facility on paper was actually the distribution hub for Westlake's harvested organs. Their corporate structure revealed offshore accounts, shell companies, and a web of protection designed to obscure the true nature of their business. Dr. Mercer isn't just involved, I realized, finding his name on Novigen's board of directors. He's a founding partner. This is his operation. The waitress refilled our coffee cups, eyeing our intense concentration with mild curiosity before moving on to other customers. Dawn light began filtering through the windows, marking another sleepless night. We need to find out who else is involved, Sarah said. Hospital administration? Other doctors? I searched through personnel documents, finding a disturbing pattern. Multiple administrators are listed as aware assets. They're being paid to look the other way. And these security personnel, they're specifically hired for their discretion. The scale of the conspiracy explained why previous concerns had been so easily dismissed. The system was designed to protect itself, to discredit or eliminate anyone. Asking questions. My phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. Not at work today. Questioned for 2 hours after your visit. Surveillance increased. Be careful. They know we were there, I told Sarah. They're already looking for us. She nodded, grimly, continuing to scroll through documents. Daniel, look at this, she said suddenly, turning the screen toward me. a medical file had been opened. My medical file from employee records. It contained standard information: blood type, vaccination history, results from my pre-employment, physical. But additional notes had been added recently, evaluating my organs for harvest potential. Kidneys grade A, exceptional function. Liver optimal, no alcohol damage. Lungs superior capacity, despite mild exposure to secondhand smoke in childhood. Subject ideal for multiple harvests before terminal procedure. A similar evaluation existed for Sarah and Christopher, and 5 other hospital employees who had asked questions or accessed restricted areas in recent months. We're already in the system, Sarah whispered, face pale. They're not just worried about us exposing them. They've already categorized us as inventory. I felt physically ill, imagining my body on one of those gurneys, organs removed one by one, while technically still alive. It was a fate worse than death. We need to disappear, I said. At least temporarily. Somewhere they can't find us, while we organize this evidence and determine who to trust with it. Sarah closed her laptop, expression resolute. I have a cabin. Family property about 3 hours north. No internet, no cell service, unless you hike to a specific ridge. Completely off-grid. Perfect, I agreed. We'll stop for supplies, then head there immediately. As we paid our bill and walked to the parking lot, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its driver obscured behind tinted windows. Same model that had followed Sarah previously. Don't look, I murmured, guiding her to her car with a hand on her back. But I think they've found us already. The sedan's engine started as we pulled out of the parking lot. The hunt had begun. We lost the sedan by driving through a series of small towns, taking random turns and backtracking until we were reasonably certain no one followed us to the cabin. The property sat nestled among pine trees, a small wooden structure that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. My grandfather built it, Sarah explained as she unlocked the door. No one's been here in months, but it should be habitable. The interior was rustic but clean. A wood stove for heat, propane lamps for light, and a hand pump for well water. Solar panels on the roof provided minimal electricity, enough to charge our devices. We should be safe here while we organize the evidence, Sarah said, unpacking the groceries we purchased. No one knows about this place except my immediate family. I wasn't entirely convinced. The resources behind Novigen seemed extensive, their surveillance capabilities concerning. But the isolated location offered our best chance at temporary safety. We spent the day sorting through photos and documents, organizing them into categories: donor acquisition, surgical procedures, financial transactions, client lists, hospital accomplices. Each piece of evidence more damning than the last. We need to decide who to trust with this, I said as evening approached. Local police could be compromised. Hospital board members are implicated. Even some state officials appear in these financial records. FBI? Sarah suggested. This crosses state lines, involves international trafficking. That's federal jurisdiction. Possibly. Or investigative journalists? Create public exposure that can't be easily buried? We debated options while preparing a simple dinner, the normalcy of cooking oddly comforting amid the horror of our discoveries. I found myself watching Sarah, admiring her resilience, her fierce determination to expose the truth despite the personal danger. After eating, I stepped outside to collect more firewood. The night air carried the scent of pine and distant rain. Stars pierced the darkness overhead, reminding me of a world beyond our immediate nightmare. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine an after, a time when this would be behind us. My phone vibrated in my pocket, shattering the illusion of peace. No service this deep in the woods. It shouldn't be receiving messages. The screen showed one new text from an unknown number. We know where you are. Return to Westlake Memorial 4. Discussion of terms. Come alone, O.R. Sarah Wells. Suffers consequences. Ice formed in my veins. They'd found us. Tracked my phone despite no apparent service. Had they followed us after all? Or traced the phone through other means? A second message appeared. Midnight tonight. Morgue entrance. Delete evidence before arrival. Compliance ensures Sarah's safety. I should warn Sarah immediately. But looking through the cabin window, seeing her bent over her laptop, focused on organizing our evidence, I hesitated. What if they were watching right now? What if any attempt to warn her triggered immediate action against her? My phone buzzed. Again, an image this time. A photo taken through the cabin window showing Sarah at the table. Timestamp. 2 minutes ago. They were here. Watching us, close enough to see inside. Heart racing, I scanned the surrounding woods, seeing nothing but darkness between the trees. They could be anywhere. Multiple observers, possibly armed. I had to assume they could hear us if I went back inside. Had to assume any attempt to escape together would be detected. Would they really hurt Sarah if I didn't comply? The evidence we'd uncovered suggested they had no moral qualms about harming others. People were just collections of valuable organs too. Them got another text. Decision time, Daniel. Your cooperation buys her life. Hands shaking, I typed back. How do I know you won't hurt her anyway? The response came immediately. You don't. But defiance guarantees. IT. I had no good options. Going to the hospital alone was likely a death sentence. Dr. Mercer had already marked me for harvesting in his files. But refusing put Sarah in immediate danger. Perhaps I could appear to comply while alerting authorities. But who could I trust? And how could I contact them without surveillance detecting it? My phone buzzed one final time. A video attachment. I opened it, then nearly dropped the phone in horror. Christopher, strapped to a gurney, conscious but unable to move as a surgical team prepped him for a procedure. Dr. Mercer visible in frame, gloved and masked, speaking directly to the camera. Your colleague made his choice, Daniel. Now you make yours. Midnight. The video ended, replaced by a new image. A surgical tray with instruments laid out. A patient chart visible at the edge of frame. My name on the admission form. My organs, already assigned to waiting recipients. I walked back into the cabin, maintaining a neutral expression despite the terror coursing through me. Sarah looked up, smiling briefly before returning to her work. We should get some rest soon, I said casually, praying my voice sounded normal. Tomorrow we'll need to hike up to that ridge, find cell service to make contact. She nodded, unaware of the eyes watching us, the decision weighing on me, the midnight deadline approaching with each passing minute. I had 5 hours to figure out how to save us both. I needed to warn Sarah without alerting our watchers. Grabbing a notepad, I casually sat beside her at the table, angling my body to block the window's view. I'm making a list of who we should contact, I said conversationally while writing. We are being watched. They send threats. Don't react. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her composure. Good idea, she replied, taking the pen to add. How many? Where? I wrote, unknown. They have photos of U.S. inside cabin from minutes ago, demanding I return to hospital alone by midnight. Her face paled, but she nodded as if we were discussing mundane plans. She wrote, we need to get evidence out regardless of what happens. She was right. Even if they captured or killed us, the evidence had to reach authorities. Our deaths would mean nothing if the organ trafficking continued. I'm going to make some tea, Sarah announced. Moving to the kitchen area. She filled the kettle noisily, covering the sound as she whispered, the bathroom has no windows. We can talk there. I nodded, gathering our materials with deliberate casualness. I'll organize these files while the water boils. In the bathroom, door locked and shower running to mask our voices, We spoke freely for the first time since receiving the threats. They have Christopher, I told her. Sent video of him prepped. For surgery. They'll harvest his organs if I don't comply. Jesus, Sarah breathed. We have to call for help. No service here, and they're watching. If we try hiking to the ridge now, they'll intercept us. So what do? I took her hands in mine. I've been thinking. We need to split the evidence, create multiple copies, ensure it reaches authorities, even if we don't. Sarah nodded, eyes fierce with determination. I have a waterproof case in my car. We can hide one copy in the lake, another under the floorboards. And I'll take a copy with me when I go to the hospital. What? Sarah gripped my arms. You can't seriously be considering going alone. If I don't, they'll kill Christopher immediately. And they'll come for you. They'll kill you too, Daniel. Those surgical orders we found had your name on them. Not if they think I'm cooperating. I'll tell them I'll testify the photos were manipulated, that we fabricated everything. Time for you to get the evidence out. Sarah's expression hardened. No, we leave together. Now, through the back. There's an old hunting trail that doesn't appear on maps. They're watching all approaches. And Christopher dies if I don't show. One life against exposing hundreds of murders? The coldly logical question hung between us. The terrible calculus of who lived and who died. I can't sacrifice him, I finally said, or risk them coming after you. But I'm not giving up either. We formulated a desperate plan. I would appear to cooperate, return to the hospital alone. Sarah would wait until the watchers followed me, then escape with the evidence via the hunting trail. She'd contact Mike Miller, who would connect her with a journalist he trusted. The evidence would be published online and sent to multiple law enforcement agencies simultaneously, too public to bury. Meanwhile, I would stall at the hospital, pretending to lead them to non-existent additional evidence, buying time for Sarah to execute her part of the plan. Back in the main room, we prepared multiple copies of our findings, assembling comprehensive files that told the complete story. Financial records proving Dr. Mercer's connection to Navajan. Medical charts documenting living donors harvested for organs. Shipping manifests tracking human tissues to wealthy international clients. You should take this, Sarah said, handing me a small USB drive. It has everything. If you see an opportunity to escape or contact authorities, I will, I promised. Though we both knew my chances were slim dot as the deadline approached, we made our final preparations. Sarah concealed evidence caches throughout the property while I wrote a detailed statement, signing and dating it as my sworn testimony. It's almost time, I said, checking my watch. 11:15 p.m. The drive back to Westlake would take at least 30 minutes. Sarah hugged me fiercely. Be careful. Find a way out if you can. Get the evidence published, I replied. No matter what happens to me, make them pay for what they've done. I walked to my car under a moonless sky, feeling unseen eyes tracking my movement. As I drove away, I glimpsed headlights illuminating in the distance. A vehicle pulling out to follow me. The trap was set. Now we would see who survived it. Westlake Memorial Hospital loomed against the night sky, its windows illuminated in patches where night staff worked. The employee parking garage sat mostly empty, my footsteps echoing as I made my way toward the morgue entrance. 2 security guards I didn't recognize flanked the door. Their uniforms matched hospital standard, but their posture and alertness suggested military or specialized training. Neither wore name badges. Mr. Foster, one acknowledged. You're expected. They escorted me through silent corridors, not to the morgue, but to the service elevator leading to the sub-basement. My pulse raced as the doors closed, trapping me with my captors. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket, a small piece of truth in a building filled with lies. The sub-basement corridor stretched before us. antiseptically clean under harsh fluorescent lighting. Unlike my previous visit with Sarah, the area now hummed with activity. Staff in surgical scrubs moved between rooms. Monitors beeped. The machinery of death disguised as medical procedure. They led me to what appeared to be an administrative office. Dr. Mercer sat behind a desk, his pale features composed, hands folded precisely before him. Unlike his usual surgical attire, he wore an expensive suit, every inch the successful medical executive rather than the monster I knew him to be. "Daniel," he greeted me, voice clinically detached. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. Please sit." The guards remained by the door, blocking any escape. I sat across from Mercer, studying the man who had orchestrated hundreds of murders for profit. "Where's Christopher?" I demanded. "Your security guard friend is currently stable," Mercer replied. "His continued well-being depends entirely on our conversation." "And Sarah?" A thin smile. "Still at the cabin, under observation. For now. What do you want?" Mercer leaned forward slightly. "I want to understand you, Daniel. A morgue attendant with no remarkable background, no special training. Yet you've caused significant disruption to a sophisticated medical operation. Why risk everything to investigate matters beyond your concern? Beyond my concern?" Anger flared. "Through my fear, you're murdering people, harvesting organs from living donors." Such dramatic terminology, Mercer sighed. "We're utilizing medical resources that would otherwise go to waste, providing life-saving treatments to those who can afford them. The traditional organ donation system is inefficient, riddled with bureaucracy and arbitrary moral constraints. Those constraints exist to prevent exactly what you're doing." Mercer waved a dismissive hand. "Every medical advance in history faced resistance from the conventionally minded. The first heart transplants were considered abominations. The first vaccines sparked riots. What we're doing here is the future of transplantation. You're keeping people alive to harvest multiple organs over time," I said, disgust rising in my throat. "There's nothing medical about that. It's torture." "They feel nothing," Mercer countered. "Brain function is minimal. Pain response is suppressed. Meanwhile, each donor saves up to 8 lives through our program. The mathematics of ethics clearly supports our approach." I realized arguing morality with Mercer was pointless. He'd constructed an ethical framework that justified his atrocities, wrapped in the language of medical necessity. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we discuss terms." Mercer pushed a document across the desk. "This contract stipulates your employment with Novigen Therapeutics as a consultant. Generous compensation, comprehensive benefits. In exchange, you provide a signed statement that your allegations were fabricated, your evidence manipulated, and if I refuse, then we proceed with our contingency plan." He opened a laptop, turning it to show me a live feed of Christopher strapped to a surgical table, medical staff preparing equipment nearby. "Your friend's organs have already been matched to waiting clients. Quite valuable, particularly his lungs. Excellent capacity." Another screen showed Sarah's cabin, exterior view from multiple angles. Armed men in tactical gear positioned around the perimeter. "Sarah's capture is imminent," Mercer continued. "Shall join our donor program as well, unless you sign." My mind raced through options. Stall for time. Sarah needed at least an hour to escape through the hunting trail and reach civilization. "I want proof Christopher will be released," I demanded. "And confirmation Sarah remains unharmed." "Reasonable requests," Mercer nodded. "I'll arrange a video call with the cabin team. And Christopher can be returned to the security department once our agreement is formalized." He made a call, speaking in clipped, professional terms. I used the moment to assess the room. No obvious weapons, 2 guards at the door. Mercer himself, physically unimposing but dangerous in other ways. The laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Mercer turned it toward me, showing a tactical team leader outside Sarah's cabin. "Status report," Mercer requested. "Perimeter secured," the man replied. "No movement detected inside for approximately 40 minutes. Awaiting order to breach." 40 minutes. Sarah had already escaped. Relief flooded through me, quickly concealed. "Maintain position," Mercer ordered. "Await my command." He turned back to me. "Satisfied? Now your decision, Daniel. A new career with us, or join our donor program alongside your friends." I reached for the contract, feigning defeat. "I'll need to read the terms." "Of course," Mercer smiled thinly. "Take your time. Though I should mention, your medical evaluation suggests exceptional organ quality, particularly your kidneys. Type O negative, universal donor, quite valuable on the international market." The clinical assessment of my body's worth chilled me. More than any overt threat. To Mercer, I wasn't human. Just inventory to be processed. As I pretended to read the contract, buying precious minutes for Sarah, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Shouting, running footsteps. The guards exchanged glances, one moving to investigate. The door burst open. Christopher staggered in, blood seeping through his hospital gown, an alarming wound visible on his side. Behind him, chaos spread through the corridor. Christopher collapsed against the doorframe, his security uniform replaced by a surgical gown now soaked with blood. His face was ashen, movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Fire alarm," he gasped. "Upper levels, staff evacuating." Dr. Mercer rose, face contorted with rage. "How did you get free?" Christopher's grin smile revealed blood-stained teeth. "Your staff got sloppy when the alarm started, left me unattended." The remaining guard moved to restrain Christopher, but I seized the opportunity. Lunging across the desk to tackle Mercer, we crashed to the floor, papers flying. Mercer was stronger than his slender frame suggested, immediately fighting back with surprising ferocity. "Code Black," he shouted. "Security to administration." A guard hesitated, torn between helping Mercer and stopping Christopher, who had produced a security key card and was attempting to lock the electronic door controls. I wrestled Mercer for control, knowing I had seconds before reinforcements arrived. My fingers found his throat, pressing against his windpipe. Not to kill, just to incapacitate. His eyes bulged with shock as his oxygen supply diminished. The guard made his decision, abandoning Christopher to pull me off Mercer. I felt powerful. Hands grasped my shoulders, yanking me backward. Then Christopher was there, swinging a metal paperweight from Mercer's desk. It connected with the guard's temple with a sickening thud. The man dropped, unconscious or worse. "We need to move," Christopher panted, clutching his bleeding side. "Fire's a diversion. Sarah's doing." "Sarah? She's here?" Hope and fear collided in my chest, parking barrage. She accessed the fire systems, triggered the evacuation. Christopher slumped against the wall, strength fading. "Go. I'll hold this door as long as I can." "Not without you," I insisted, moving to support him. "Too late for me," he coughed, blood spattering his lips. "They already started the procedure, took part of my liver before the alarms. I'm bleeding internally." Mercer was recovering, reaching for a phone on his desk. I kicked it from his hand, then delivered another blow to ensure he stayed down. "There's an emergency exit," Christopher directed, pointing down the corridor. "Maintenance access. Security key opens it." I hesitated, unwilling to leave him to die. He pressed his key card into my palm with bloody fingers. "They were going to take everything," he whispered. "At least this way, my death means something. Now go, expose them." The corridor outside had descended into controlled chaos. Medical. Staff rushed to secure donors and equipment, prioritizing the most valuable specimens. In the confusion, a blood-soaked security guard and a desperate morgue attendant went unnoticed. I followed Christopher's directions, half running, half staggering toward the maintenance access door at the corridor's end. Behind me, shouts indicated Mercer had recovered, was organizing pursuit. The key card worked, unlocking a narrow stairwell that smelled of dust and disuse. I took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the pain in my ribs where Mercer had landed a solid blow. 3 flights up brought me to another door marked Garage Access Authorized Personnel Only. The parking garage was in chaos, employees evacuating. Due to the fire alarm, security personnel trying to maintain order while searching for saboteurs. Smoke detectors blared, emergency lights pulsed, creating disorienting patterns of shadow and illumination. I scanned the crowd desperately, searching for Sarah. Had Christopher been right? Was she really here? Or had he been delirious from blood? Loss? A car horn honked 3 times from the far corner. I turned to see Sarah behind the wheel of an unfamiliar sedan, frantically gesturing for me to hurry. I sprinted across the garage, aware of shouts behind me as someone recognized my face. Security radio chatter increased. Coordinates of my position relayed to response teams. Sarah flung open the passenger door as I approached. Get in. I dove into the seat as she accelerated, tires squealing against concrete. Behind us, security, vehicles mobilized in pursuit. Christopher? She asked, navigating the spiral exit ramp at dangerous speed. Didn't make it, I managed, breath coming in painful gasps. They started harvesting before the alarms. Sarah's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. They'll pay for that. For all of it. We burst into the night, swerving around ambulances responding to the fire alarm. Sarah drove with focused intensity, taking random turns through side streets to shake pursuit. The evidence? I asked. Sent all of it. Mike Miller connected me with a journalist who specializes in medical fraud. She's publishing everything online. Tonight, sending copies to FBI field offices in 3 states. Sarah checked the rearview mirror for followers. It's over. By morning, everyone will know what happened at Westlake Memorial. Relief warred with grief in my chest. Christopher's sacrifice, the horror of what we'd witnessed, the knowledge that some involved might still escape justice. But the truth would be known. The killing would stop. Whose car is this? I asked, noticing the unfamiliar interior. Borrowed from the hospital visitor lot, Sarah admitted. We need to abandon it soon, find another way out of town. Her calm efficiency impressed me. While I'd been confronting Mercer, she'd been systematically dismantling his organization's security, creating chaos that enabled our escape. Where do we go now? I asked as we turned onto the highway, heading away from town lights. Somewhere they can't find us, Sarah replied. At least until the story breaks. After that, we'll be safer in the open. Too many people will know our names. As the miles accumulated between us and Westlake Memorial, I allowed myself to believe we might actually survive to see justice done. That the nightmare might eventually end. I was wrong. We abandoned the borrowed car in a shopping mall parking lot, continuing our journey via bus, then taxi, eventually reaching a motel outside state lines. Sarah paid cash for a room, using a false name with practiced ease that suggested she'd prepared for this contingency long before our escape became necessary. The motel offered little comfort, but provided anonymity and reliable internet. We huddled around Sarah's laptop, refreshing news sites and monitoring the journalists' online platforms for signs that our story had broken. Why isn't anything posting yet? I asked, anxiety mounting as hours passed without news. Rebecca said. She needed time to verify key details, Sarah explained. She won't publish until she's confident it can't be discredited. Morning arrived with no developments. We alternated sleeping in shifts, one always watching the door, prepared for Mercer's people to somehow track us down. By afternoon, Exhaustion and stress had frayed our nerves to breaking point. "Something's wrong," I finally said. "The evidence should be public by now." Sarah nodded grimly, dialing Rebecca's number again. Like previous attempts, it went straight to voicemail. "We need a backup plan. Another journalist, maybe. Or we go directly to the FBI," I suggested. "Even if Mercer has connections, he can't control every field office." Before Sarah could respond, her laptop chimed with an incoming email. Rebecca's address, finally. The message was brief. Story delayed. Sources questioned. Meeting FBI agents tomorrow to verify documents. "Stay hidden. That's not right," Sarah frowned. Rebecca wouldn't delay with evidence this solid, and she'd never risk exposing us by mentioning FBI involvement in an unsecured email. My skin prickled with renewed fear. "You think they got to? Her? Or that's not really her. We need to assume the worst." We gathered our meager possessions, preparing to relocate again. As Sarah packed her laptop, breaking news alerts suddenly flooded in. Local stations first, then national outlets. But the headlines weren't what we expected. Hospital research program targeted by disgruntled employees. Westlake Memorial denies allegations of impropriety. Former morgue attendant wanted for questioning in hospital data breach. The story had broken, but not our story. A carefully crafted counter-narrative was emerging, painting us as thieves who had stolen sensitive patient data. Dr. Mercer appeared in video clips, his expression appropriately concerned as he explained how terminated employees had fabricated allegations after being caught accessing confidential records. "They're getting ahead of the story," Sarah whispered, "discrediting us before the truth comes out." "What about Rebecca? The evidence?" "I don't know, but we can't wait to find out." We made a desperate decision. Using the motel's business center computer, we uploaded everything directly to social media platforms, news tip lines, and public document repositories. No intermediaries, no journalists to be pressured or silenced. Raw evidence unleashed into the digital wild where it couldn't be easily contained. Within hours, the narrative began to shift. Independent reporters picked up fragments of our evidence, particularly the surgical photos and financial records linking Westlake to Novigen. Hashtags formed. Crowdsourced investigations connected dots we hadn't even seen dot by evening. Cable news networks were running breaking stories on allegations of illegal organ harvesting at Westlake Memorial. Dr. Mercer's previous interviews suddenly appeared calculated rather than concerned. Hospital administrators issued increasingly defensive statements. The FBI announced a formal investigation, with agents seen entering hospital premises with search warrants. Local police established a perimeter around Novigen Therapeutics facilities. "It's working," Sarah said, watching live coverage on the motel television. "They can't bury it now." A knock at our door froze us both in place. We hadn't ordered room service. No one knew our location. "Housekeeping," called a female voice. Sarah motioned me to silence, pointing to the bathroom as a hiding place. I complied, positioning myself behind the door with the room's ice bucket as an improvised weapon. I heard Sarah open the main door slightly, keeping the security chain engaged. "We don't need service today," she said firmly. "Sarah Wells?" The female voice dropped its housekeeping pretense. "FBI. We need to talk." My heart raced. Legitimate agents or Mercer's people using false credentials? "Show me identification, Sarah." Demanded. I heard movement, presumably the agent displaying credentials through the narrow opening. "You can verify my identity by calling the FBI field office," the woman continued. "Ask for Agent Lisa Monroe. They'll confirm I'm here officially." Sarah used the room phone to make the call, verifying the agent's identity before reluctantly. Removing the security chain. 2 people entered, a woman and man in professional attire, both carrying the unmistakable demeanor of federal law enforcement. Daniel Foster? Agent Monroe called. "You can come out. We're here to help." I emerged cautiously from the bathroom, still distrustful despite their credentials. "We've been monitoring the evidence you released," Monroe explained, "cross-referencing with hospital records we've seized. Your documentation is compelling. We need your formal statements." "How did you find us?" Sarah asked. "Credit card trail from the bus station. We've been tracking you since yesterday, staying back to ensure we didn't spook you." Monroe's expression softened slightly. "You've been through hell. But right now, we need to get you both into protective custody." "Why?" I asked. "Because 2 key witnesses against Westlake have already disappeared," the male agent said. "Your colleague Christopher Jenkins was pronounced dead at the scene. And the journalist you contacted, Rebecca Winters, hasn't been seen since yesterday." Sarah paled. "Rebecca's missing?" "Her apartment shows signs of forced entry. We have agents looking for her." "And Dr. Mercer?" I asked. "In custody, along with several hospital administrators and Novigen executives," Monroe confirmed. "But this operation appears extensive, with international connections. Until we understand the full network, you're both at risk." Within 30 minutes, we were in an unmarked FBI vehicle, heading toward what the agents described as a secure location. Through the window, I watched familiar landscapes recede, wondering if we'd ever truly escape the shadow of what we'd uncovered. At Westlake Memorial, that our evidence was public. The authorities were involved. Justice seemed possible, finally, yet something in Agent Monroe's carefully neutral expression suggested the fight was far from over. 6 months passed in a blur of depositions, grand jury testimony, and witness protection protocols. Sarah and I lived in separate safe houses, our contact limited to supervised meetings during joint testimony preparation. The FBI maintained this separation for security, though I suspected it also prevented us from comparing notes too extensively. The case against Westlake Memorial and Novigen Therapeutics proceeded with surprising speed. Dr. Mercer and 5 other executives faced multiple charges, including murder, conspiracy, and organ trafficking. Hospital administrators received immunity deals in exchange for testimony against higher-ups. Financial records revealed offshore accounts containing millions in profits from the illegal organ trade. Media coverage was extensive initially, then gradually waned as newer scandals captured public attention. Our names appeared in early reports, but faded from headlines as the legal machinery ground forward without the spectacle of a trial. Most defendants accepted plea deals rather than face public exposure of their crimes. When the protective restrictions finally eased, allowing me to move about with reasonable anonymity, my first destination was Hillside Cemetery. Dissection for unclaimed bodies had transformed. Yellow excavation tape cordoned off rows of graves, many with disturbed soil where exhumations had occurred. Temporary markers indicated ongoing identification efforts. I found Sarah there, clipboard in hand, conferring with a forensic anthropologist beside an open grave. Her auburn hair was shorter now, practical rather than flattering, her fair skin tanned from outdoor work. She spotted me approaching and excused herself from the conversation. "You look better," she said by way of greeting, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "So do you," I replied. "They finally letting you work the site?" She nodded. "Victim identification consultant. Turns out my cemetery records were more complete than the hospital's. I can match burial locations with likely identities for DNA confirmation." "How many so far?" 73 confirmed matches. Families finally getting answers. She gestured toward the open graves. Another 100 still unidentified. I surveyed the excavation teams working methodically across the grounds. And the empty ones? Where the bodies never made it here. 26. Graves contained medical waste rather than remains. Surgical byproducts from the harvesting procedures, giving the graves appropriate weight if anyone checked. Her clinical tone couldn't quite mask her lingering horror. Those families may never have closure. We walked among the markers, Sarah occasionally consulting her clipboard to identify specific cases. The scale of the tragedy remained difficult to comprehend even after months of investigation. "Have you heard about Mercer's plea deal?" Sarah asked, stopping beside a freshly filled grave where a proper headstone had replaced the unclaimed marker. 10 consecutive life terms, testimony against international partners, assets forfeited. I recited the terms that had been explained to me by prosecutors. Better than he deserves. The Novigen board members got less. 15 to 20 years. Possibility of parole. Sarah's voice hardened. And most hospital staff who enabled it claimed ignorance or coercion. Minimal sentences. At least the killing stopped, I offered. Though the justice seemed incomplete, Sarah's expression suggested similar dissatisfaction. For now. But the system that allowed it remains largely intact. What do you mean? She led me to a secluded bench beneath an oak tree, checking to ensure we were alone before continuing. The FBI investigation focused narrowly on Westlake and Novigen, but the evidence pointed to other hospitals with similar patterns. Facilities in 3 other states showing statistical anomalies in unclaimed bodies, organ donor programs with unexplained deficiencies. I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. You think it's more widespread? I know it is, Sarah said quietly. But when I tried to get the investigators to expand their scope, I hit bureaucratic walls. Jurisdictional issues, resource limitations, pressure from somewhere to contain the scandal. The implications were disturbing. Powerful interests protecting similar operations elsewhere, limiting exposure to this single hospital system. What about Christopher? I asked, changing the subject to one that had haunted me for months. Did his family get closure? Sarah nodded toward a distant grave with fresh flowers. Military funeral last month. His service record earned him Arlington, but his sister wanted him here. To remind people. We fell silent, watching the forensic teams continue their grim work. Eventually, Sarah checked her watch and sighed. I need to get back. The identification team needs my cemetery maps for the western section. Are you staying in town? I asked, reluctant to part ways so soon. For now. The FBI still wants me available for follow-up testimony. She hesitated. You? Witness protection offered relocation, new identity. I turned it down. Didn't want to disappear. Let them bury what happened. Sarah studied me with an unreadable expression. Be careful, Daniel. Not everyone involved was identified or charged. Some had enough influence to remain completely hidden. You think we're still at risk? Instead of answering directly, she pushed up her sleeve, revealing a thin surgical scar I hadn't noticed before. Recent, still pink with healing. I collapsed about a month ago. Severe pain, internal bleeding, emergency surgery. Her voice remained steady, but fear flickered in her eyes. The surgeon found evidence of a previous procedure. Recent, professional. A small section of my liver removed. Horror washed through me. That's not possible. You were in protective custody. For most of the investigation, yes. But there were gaps. Times I was alone. She pulled her sleeve down. I have no memory of any surgery, Daniel. No explanation for when it happened. My hand instinctively went to my side, where an unexplained tenderness had bothered me for weeks. I'd attributed it to stress, to sleeping poorly on unfamiliar safe house mattresses. You should get checked, Sarah said, noting my reaction. Thoroughly, by doctors with no connection to Westlake or this case. If they could reach us during the investigation, then they can reach anyone, she finished. The operation hasn't ended, Daniel. It's just adapted. As she walked back toward the excavation teams, I remained on the bench, sunlight suddenly seeming less warm. The cemetery's peaceful atmosphere transformed into something menacing. I thought of all the people involved in the case. Investigators, prosecutors, witnesses. How many had unexplained? Medical incidents in recent months? How many carried surgical scars they couldn't account for? The graves around me weren't just reminders of past crimes, but warnings of an ongoing horror. One that had evolved beyond a single hospital's basement to something more insidious, more difficult to detect or expose. I touched my side again, feeling the tender spot with new fear. How much of me was already missing? What parts had been harvested while I slept, shipped to wealthy clients who never questioned their origin? Sarah was right. The system remained intact, and we were still its inventory.